Why did the vampire go to art school? Because he wanted to learn how to draw blood. What's going on, YouTube? One of the most common questions that's either asked in Discord, asked on Facebook, commented in the comments below, or just searched on YouTube is, should I be a vampire? And while the vampires didn't get any changes in Update 42 except a specific furnishing plan, it looks a little bit different now. It's important to talk about, should you in the year 2024 be a vampire? What are the pros? What are the cons? Should you be one? How do you become one? And how can we talk about all that in a nice, concise way that makes it certain if you, the player, the watcher, the listener, should be one? And to start us off, let's talk about what the game tells us about being a vampire. I always want to encourage people to use in-game resources to get any information that they can. If you go to the help section, go to tutorials, go to character progression, and then go to vampirism, it actually gives us a pretty cool breakdown of vampirism, stating that vampirism is a unique skill line you can acquire. The vampire line has both active and passive abilities that can be used alongside your other skills. To obtain the vampire skill line, you must be infected by a special vampire monster that are only active during certain times of the day and in certain locations, or you can have another player bite you. In the year 2024, getting bitten by another player is the easier avenue, and then you can be cured by a priest of RK, but we're going to talk about some other ways that you can do that. So the easiest way to become a vampire is to be in one of these shrines. The most common one is here in Bankarai. And here is a detailed map of where all of the shrines are. It is important to note that it does not matter what alliance you're in, what alliance the other person is in. If you want to either A, be bitten by another player because you're into that, or bite other people because you're into that, you could do that at any shrine, regardless of your alliance, regardless of any zones or specifics. You can pick any of these three shrines. And generally, too, you can find people to fast travel there. As you will not naturally have a way shrine here, you can use active guilds to teleport here to find way shrines, but more than likely, if somebody's willing to help you become a vampire, it's going to be relatively easy to get to these way shrines. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this point because I know a lot of people who will come to ESO, be really interested in becoming a vampire, and they will buy it from the crown store, or they will subvert these systems so that they could just become one very quickly. And I would just encourage you that you don't have to do that. It's actually better if you utilize other players. I can bite up to 4 people at a time just because I have that many vampires at any given time. And it's important to know that there's plenty of people who will do it for free who will help you, or you can utilize the systems by going to these shrines. There might be an NPC there that will also bite you. So please don't feel the need to see this as some sort of like crown store thing with how many bans, Discords, Facebooks, Reddit groups. Utilize those, become indebted with the community. Use my community in the link below. Will make you become a vampire if you want one. But should you be one? And to first answer that question, we have to actually break down why being a vampire used to be more of a long-term commitment. Being a vampire used to be one of those things that you were stuck with, essentially. If a character was a vampire, it was a vampire. You had to do the weird things. You would show up in teenage romance novels. Your skin would glow a weird color. Like, you were pretty committed to the role of being a vampire. But now, being a vampire is actually a curse that can be taken on and off inside the armory system. For example, if I equip this build that is a vampire, I become a vampire. If I equip this build, which is just a blank one that I use to reset myself, I'm not a vampire anymore. I don't have to go through and worry about going out in the sunlight, wearing sunscreen, and all that other stuff. And that is very important because it used to be you almost had to pick if you wanted to have a PvE character or PvP character, and being a vampire was a pretty big point in that conversation. Let's talk about why that is. And it's this perk right here that really separates the two groups. Reduces your damage taken up to 30% based on your missing health. And we'll talk about everything, all the negatives, positives, other abilities, but this is why the majority of PvP players are slightly swayed into being a vampire, if nothing else. And that is because when you're in a PvP situation, you are going to get executed, and people are going to use abilities that do more damage based on the amount of health that you don't have. So you're taking a beating, and then all of a sudden everyone's trying to finish you off non-sexually, And you want to be in a situation where you have a little bit more protection. And that's why a lot of people, to protect themselves, will become vampires. It gives them a little bit of extra, rubber to keep themselves safe. Now, you won't be able to eat anything that has garlic inside of it, and you might be weak if somebody attacks you with a wooden stake. But when it comes to keeping your health above 0, which is essential for PvP, you'll be in a situation where you've got a little more juice in the tank. But generally, from a PvE perspective, you're just going to be sitting there doing a parse, you're doing your taxes while you run your macro on your computer, you're just clicking and clacking buttons to the side while, all the healers and tanks do the actual hard work. And because of that, you don't want to be in a situation where you need to not take damage when you have less health, because you're just sitting there pretty. DPS are basically the cheerleaders, and the actual football players that they're cheering on are the healers and the tanks. They do the main work inside of trials. So how does it work, the passive? So as you increase your vampire stage, different things happen. How do you increase your vampire stage? Well, it's based on you either feeding or not feeding, but there's also consumables such as bloody maras that will make you go up and down at will, and other furnishings that you'll find inside of guild halls that can take you up and down as necessary. So essentially, as you feed more, you increase your vampirism more, because you're going feral. Ooh. And then because of that, your stages increase. But if you touch this weird fountain thing, you lose your vampirism. Or if you drink a specific drink, you lose your vampirism stages. Or if you wait, 2 hours, you lose your vampirism stages. So a lot of key things happen in that stage. And also importantly, certain perks don't kick in unless you're at certain stages. Because you might think, well, Jake, even in PvE, I'd like to not be finished off. What if the tank, lets the boss, off the chain, and then I get whacked over the head? Well, there's a reason why not everybody's a vampire, and that's because you're going to be suffering from all of these debuffs. So for example, if you're stage 3, your flame damage taken is increased by 13%. So if he bonks you over the head with a flaming club, you just take an additional 13% damage. That's not very helpful. Your regular abilities are going to cost 8% more if you're stage 3. If you're stage 1, it's 3%, and so on and so on. The only benefit from these stages is vampire ability costs, which we'll talk about after we go through the passives. And generally, if you're in a PvP scenario, you're going to either be a stage 2, 3, or 4, depending on what exactly you're trying to do. So let's break down the passives. This is basically a freebie. Ignore the movement speed penalty of sneak. You just kind of sneak normally, fastly, quickly. This can be pretty helpful in PvP, obviously, because if they can't see you, generally they can't kill you unless you're really bad at walking into things that you shouldn't or off of things that you shouldn't. So this is a freebie. Now, stage 2 or higher. Now we're getting into some things that could be pretty helpful depending on what you want to try to do. Nightblades especially take advantage of when you leave your sneak or mistform, your weapon and spell damage is increased by 300 for 6 seconds. 300 weapon and spell damage is a pretty good chunk of weapon and spell damage. 6 seconds is not nothing to scoff at, especially because there's no cooldown. You just go into stealth, into mistform, pew, 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 and bada bing, bada boom, you're getting yourself a bunch of free ones. Now, your stage 3, you get yourself the ability to not be easily killed, and this is a very helpful one. Now, this is a bit of a nothing one. This just lets you turn other people into vampires, which is helpful if you've got friends that you want to convert. You could easily use this. There are some people that try to sell vampire bites. Very hard to do that these days with the armory changes, but it's nice to be able to help other people. And then unnatural movement is the most unique one, because if you sprint for 3 seconds consecutively, you become invisible, and it reduces the cost of your sprint by 50%, which might seem not super helpful, but when you consider that Magicka characters don't have a lot of stamina and they have to use a lot of it with either blocking or roll dodging, it can be pretty helpful to save on some sprinting, because you might need to, run a little bit. You might need to chase somebody down. And so because of that, this can be pretty helpful. However, if you're stage 4, we got to reference our chart here, you have 0 health recovery. So there's people who pair this with some unique builds that if you're below a specific portion of health, you do a lot more damage, and there's some fun ways to do that. But overall, I would say generally you're going to either be a stage 2 or 3 vampire unless you're playing a very specific Nightblade build or stealth build that you want to use stage 4 vampirism. Now, let's start with your ultimate, because it is pretty cool and I have used it in the past. Basically, you turn into a big old vampire lord. If you played Skyrim, you could be one of these indefinitely. Don't ask me why you can't hear, probably because you were the Dragonborn back then. Don't tell me in the comments below that there was a whole castle of these goons that were not Dragonborn. We don't know what their heritage was. So we could be one for 20 seconds. And by doing that, you basically restore a ton of your magicka points, health, stamina. You're increased by your total cap, meaning you do more damage, you heal, you do damage around you. It's pretty good. If you're in a PvP situation and you're about to die, well, now you're going to deal more damage. Now you're going to have more resources to pull from. And importantly, you can also morph this into another way that lets you take no negative effects from being a stage 4 vampire. So you're going to have your health recovery, your active skills are going to be back to normal costs again. It can be a pretty good time for you. Now, these other ones I have been experimenting with. Ethereal Burst and Blood Mist are really the only two ones of note. And that's really just because, in my opinion, there's not really a close range magicka attack that you can use. It deals more damage based on how much health you're missing, which can be neat because generally, if you're fighting somebody, your health's not going to be continuously capped at full health. But overall, Ethereal Burst or Arterial Bursts, the bursts of your arteries, is not going to be very helpful. Blood Frenzy is a really niche one because you're actually trading your active life to deal more damage. So you may see Nightblades utilize this every so often. It's pretty cool that you can toggle it. You can use it to deal damage, but overall, I would avoid something like this if you don't know what you're doing because it continues to build and build, and you take a lot more damage, and you can essentially kill yourself without even doing anything. Drain Vigor is another one that's been changed a lot throughout the years. Basically, you siphon away people's stuff, restore some health, restore some stamina. It's fine. The problem that a lot of the vampirism skill lines, and I could even say that the same with Mesmerize, is it doesn't do enough. There are so many good skills these days that to be on a hotbar, you really have to have a purpose. And that's why I think a lot of people don't even like using one bar builds, because they want to have access to a full other set of skills and things that they can use to basically complement their front bar that you're not going to get if you only use something like an Oaken Soul Ring. So because of that, that's where a lot of these suffer. But one that doesn't suffer, because we saved the best for last, is Blood Mist. Blood Mist is basically if you took the Sorcerer's Streak, made it very bloody, added some weird rain effects, and then added some other additional effects. So for example, this is the Blood Mist morph. Dissolve into a blood mist, causing the next 3 projectiles to deal no damage for you for 1 second while you dash forward and reappear at your target location after a short duration. Upon activation, the drain of blood around you for 20 seconds deals some damage, and you heal for a little bit of the damage cost. So basically, it's like a little bit of a teleportation for you. I'll give you guys an example of how this looks here so you can see it live. And overall, it's totally fine. Now, if you're on a specific class that already has access to teleports, this is probably nothing special. But this also gives certain classes that are notoriously bad for mobility to have mobility. You know, for example, Dragon Knights, which have notoriously had to rely on some really goofy things to get speed ups, now can have access to this. And they're a Dragon Knight. They're already flaming, so what's a little bit of extra flame damage to a Dragon Knight? So classes that notoriously didn't have things like gap closers now can have gap closers to be able to get to people, or get away if they would need to. In PvP, this is a pretty good thing. And you'll notice that trend as we're talking, how I keep saying in PvP, this is pretty good, because in PvE, not as much. But an important distinction here is PvE is player versus environment. And the environment doesn't just include monsters, it also includes you doing things. And a lot of people will be doing a whole bunch of different type of content. Fishing, they might be questing, they might be picking up resources, they might be exploring. And vampirism is actually a very good skill line for that. It's very good for leveling up the Dark Brotherhood, the Thieves Guild. It's very good for questing because you can essentially skip mobs, because guess what? If you're sprinting while you're invisible, you're not getting attacked. So you could just sprint to the door and walk through all those quests where it's like, hey, you got to kill a whole cave of people to get to this door. You don't. You just right to the door. And that's a pretty slept on perk. A lot of people will utilize the vampire to pick up crafting materials in the overworld, and all that stuff's pretty obvious. Obviously, one of the more annoying things is you're just trying to pick up your iron ore, and all of a sudden these vicious mud crabs are nibbling at your ankles, interrupting you. So being a vampire is an easy way around this, because essentially you could just use stealth, get to somewhere, and generally by the time you leave stealth, you'll have already picked up what you needed, done what you needed to, gotten through the door, and then you're out of there. So from that perspective, vampirism for PvE is actually really good, and I can actually encourage you guys to become vampires, because if you ask yourself what's the downside, if you're going to make a PvP class that also can, nightlight as a quester, harvester, fisherman, vampires are known for their love of fish, you can actually make a really good character out of it, utilizing the armory system without having to worry about curing yourself, becoming cursed again, or cursed, blessed, whatever. And it becomes very easy then to see the benefits. And I think that vampirism is in a good spot because of it, even though it didn't necessarily receive any sort of crazy buffs or crazy changes in any of the recent updates. It's remained pretty normal, and I think that just goes to show how the developers see it. They see it as fairly balanced, that people who want to be vampires can be vampires, and the people don't need to be a vampire, because you could certainly build without being a vampire for PvP, but if you wanted to, you certainly can. And if you wanted to use a vampire in the overworld, most quests, most actual guild PvE lines are actually benefited by you being a vampire when you complete them. But everyone, that's going to wrap up the video. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Are you a vampire? Now, no judgment. I just assume that all of you have watched both the Twilight movies and the books. Nothing wrong with that. We've, all been young once. Some of you I know are in your 50s, but, anybody can read and watch a movie at any age. Let me know in the comments below. As always, we're still doing our 3 giveaway drawings. All you have to do to enter is leave a comment in the comments below. Be subscribed. I'm actually going to increase this, so it was on YouTube and Twitch. So if you follow on Twitch or subscribe, but also now if you follow on Twitter, I will include all 3 platforms as entries. All are linked in the below. Obviously, YouTube is where you're watching this, so that's not a direct link, it's just here, but you know what I mean. And then the third thing is a random gift card code be flashed upon the screen. In that, I will flash a word on one of the videos throughout the month. If you're the first person to comment that word, you will win a gift card to either Xbox, PlayStation, or Steam, or some other, if you need a very specific one based on you playing like Mac OS through the browser that ZeniMax makes. But we'll figure it out, because thank you guys so much again for watching. I love you, and I'll catch you later. Bye, guys.
You better remember to like and subscribe to Jakeclips. Or you should. I might have to pluck your eyes if you don't. Or, better yet, I'll skip rope with your entrails. Do it now. Subscribe. Ta-ta. Off with you.